All right, so we've been, if you haven't been watching, my wife and I just had a really interesting conversation because I was
I
proposing
questioned all of his stuff.
I was proposing some ideas, and she questioned all of it, and then she kind of talked herself into everything that I was kind of proposing. It was very gratifying for me to watch. But what we're trying to work through, and I have toilet paper in my hand because I'm going to erase in a moment. But if you want to see what all this was about, then go back and watch the previous video. But what we're trying to look at is, how do we get away from this very limiting understanding of priorities in our life in terms of values, right? Kind of orienting values in terms of this list of number one, number two, number three, number four, this idea of put God first, put family second, put work third, or whatever that means, and how just crazy unhelpful that is. How does this play out in Scripture? Let me just give you one example. There's a religious figure that confronts Jesus, and here, I'll erase this for you real quick. There's a religious figure that confronts Jesus and says, "Teacher, what is the most important commandment?" And he says, "What is the, like, single most important commandment?" And Jesus says this. He says, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength." And you would think that he's done right there because that's one commandment. And then he says, "And the second greatest commandment is like it," meaning the second greatest commandment is on par with this one. And he says, "Love your neighbor as you love yourself." We often think that Jesus is doing this, saying, here's number one, okay, and then once you have that figured out, then move to number two, and then once you have that figured out, then you can finally work your way down to number three. That's not how Jesus' mind worked. He didn't have this linear, okay, once you get this one done, then move on to the next one. That's not what he's saying. He's saying all of these are so interconnected that you can't pull them apart from one another. It goes back to our circles. He's saying, as you love God, that will sometimes look like love for neighbor, and that will sometimes look simply like love for God. And in the midst of all this, you are to love yourself as you do both of those. So it's kind of this interesting. It's like a, no, that's not even the right picture, right? But like three things overlapping and connected in the middle. But all of these are the greatest commandment. The greatest commandment is, as you love God, that will translate to love of neighbor, and as you're loving neighbor, that is a way of loving God. And as you do all of this, you are loving yourself, because the most loving thing to do for yourself is to love God and to love your neighbor. The most loving thing to do for yourself is to be a conduit of love from this source, the ultimate source of love. As you let that love flow through you, that love lands on you as well. It doesn't stay in you and stagnate on you. It lands on you and it flows through you to God and neighbor, and it works its way back to you. So you're keeping the flow of love going. So is it, well, do we do this one and then this one and this one? Yes and no. You do this one, and in doing this one, you're also doing those. As you do this one, you're also doing those. As you do this one, you're also doing those. The nature of love is, as you give it away, it multiplies and it flows out to everywhere. It doesn't divide. So Jesus is saying, you simply love in all directions, and the love will come back from all directions. Let it keep flowing. I hope that's helpful. Let me know what you think.